Please welcome to the stage Tyler Lessard, Vice President of Marketing at Vidyard.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the #1 rated game show for IT and operations professionals in the Greater Toronto Area, Technology Transformation Hot Seat. Woo! On episode #1, we heard incredible ideas for how to make technology transformation projects successful. In episode #2, we will be exploring the one thing that can kill any amazing tech transformation project. What was that? No, not the database architecture, though that is important. Nope, not picking a good partner, though that is important. The one thing, ladies and gentlemen, that can kill every great tech transformation project is... There were a lot of good answers there. My answer is the people, ladies and gentlemen. As we can all probably agree, you can spend as much time as you would like building out an incredible technology stack for your organization. You can transform the way they're going to do something. But if the people that you're building the technology for don't embrace that technology, if they don't adopt it, if they don't use it in a way that makes them more effective, then we all know what we all did is for naught. And that's a problem for a lot of us, especially in organizations where we have users of our systems and our services who don't come with a strong technology background and who aren't necessarily in that mindset where they want to embrace new ways of doing things. So we're going to explore that in this conversation here today and what we can all do to make sure that the people are part of our technology transformation projects and to ensure that they're successful, which will, of course, make all of us successful. Before I bring today's contestants on stage, and yes, it is going to be game show format here, guys, just to warn you, I want to share a couple quick stories from my own personal experience around the importance of bringing people into your tech transformation projects. So I'm the CMO at Vidyard. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are a video technology company, and we enable organizations to use video as integrated parts of their marketing programs, inside of Salesforce communities, inside of Service Cloud and Chatter. But one of the areas we're seeing the most adoption now is in use in sales teams. And the idea of enabling sales reps to be able to quickly record and send custom video messages out to prospects and buyers and customers, right? Instead of typing a big long email, record a quick message, build a relationship while you're communicating your message. And there's no shortage of people that are excited to do that. But when we work with customers, the biggest challenge they always have isn't the aspirational goal of this is great and everybody thinks it's the best idea. It's the problem of getting the people to adopt it and use it the way it should be used, right? The tools themselves are relatively simple. The workflows you build are relatively simple. The real challenge is getting people to change their behavior and actually say, you know what? Trying this new tool, not just once, but daily and repeatedly to get good at it makes a lot of sense. So that's something that I've learned. You know, we have thousands of customers using this, but not nearly enough of them are being successful with it. And that's where we work with partners to help make that happen. But all of you in your own organizations, I'm sure you have similar types of things that you've done. Roll down technologies where when the people don't embrace it, you don't get the value from it. The second story I wanted to share is from our own business. So we are traditionally an enterprise technology company. We've been around for about 7 years, and our primary go-to-market model has been selling what we consider top-down into businesses. So we go into organizations, we do one-to-one selling motions, we sell big deals, and then we spend hours on the phone onboarding customers, getting them up and running, and it's a very collaborative process. But we're going through a shift ourselves in moving towards a more bottoms-up model and saying, we want to enable people to use our technology for free to get started and have no barriers to entry, and then be able to raise their hands and move up and add features as they want to go. It's a great model. Right? It's a model that many tech companies are going with to drive adoption before purchase. But for us, it's meant a huge transformation in our business models, in how we manage our customer experience, in our products. And I think myself and many of the people in our organization, you know, we started this about 18 months ago, and I think we underestimated how important the people aspect of all that was, right? We had a product plan. We had a customer experience plan, we had a billing and finance plan. But it was only about 3 to 4 months ago when we realized there was lack of alignment between the different functional business units on what we were trying to deliver and when. And it seems simple, right? It's like, well, the project plans were all there. We should have all known. But the teams weren't meeting together consistently to understand not only what were we delivering, but how is each team going to be affected by that? And not only affected, but how will they each benefit from it, right? Our sales team was scared because they're like, this new model, I don't get it. How am I going to make money as a sales rep if we're giving away free product? Finance was freaked out because they had to build new systems that process credit cards and self-serve, and what if somebody cancels? Right? Individually, they all had their challenges, but it was only when we brought everybody together into what we really called our executive tiger team around this, where we started to get true cross-functional collaboration, and all the people started to work together. And I'm sure, again, many of you can think of projects where you've had those same challenges. So with that, those are a couple of my own stories. We now have a chance to hear from some incredible contestants on today's game show. So ladies and gentlemen, give it up for today's contestants, Peter, Tim, and Winnie. Come on up, you guys. Now, the good news is you do not need to answer in the form of a question. Should you choose to do so, you are perfectly well to do that. But I will continue to use my game show host voice throughout this session, and you can feel free to use your contestant voice on today's session here. We will, if you guys have burning questions that as you go through, please keep them in mind, and if we have a chance, perhaps we can address them, or there's something we can follow up with afterwards. So first, I'm going to ask our lucky contestants to introduce themselves to all of you here today. So we'll start here with Winnie.
Okay. I don't know if I have that contestant voice. My name is Winnie Luck. I'm the managing director of Rainbow Railroad. Earlier on, you heard what we do. We are a nonprofit organization that helps persecuted LGBTQI individuals escape violence. And we are also very lucky to be a beneficiary of TractionForce today. So thank you very much for just being here. You have helped our mission in saving lives. So thank you.
And Tim, what does a perfect first date look like for you?
Well, being mic'd up on stage and interrogated for a half hour, followed by drinks.
We're off to a good start.
Which is kind of like speed dating.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I think we already failed because we're out of order with the photos, but that's okay. Hopefully we still have a chance at some great prizes. My name is Tim Davison. I lead sales enablement for Morneau Shepell, and Morneau Shepell is a Canadian-founded, Canadian-headquartered, global provider of technology-enabled HR solutions.
Perfect. And Peter, I got nothing for you. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm Peter Sabula. I run our enterprise new business team for LinkedIn Canada, specifically in the Sales Navigator part of the business, and super happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, what I love is we have a great representation across different types of organizations, different sizes, different markets. So looking forward to peeling back some of the commonalities we all feel. We're going to start with Tim. I have a bit of an icebreaker question for you that I think will help the audience appreciate where you're coming from. So when you and I first chatted, you mentioned that you've been in sales for many years, and you recently moved over to the dark side of sales operations and sales enablement. And, traditionally, sales teams don't always have a great, it's the right word, appreciation for what sales enablement and operations do behind the scenes, right? All the things that come together to help the sales team be more successful. I'm curious what you've learned in your, recent tenure moving over into ops and enablement, and what advice you have for people that are trying to build better relationships across those teams to make sure that people can really function well together.
Yeah, thanks for throwing that at me right away. So I have spent the vast majority of my career in sales and sales leadership positions, and 3 years ago made the transition over into sales enablement. And part of how that happened is because of that sometimes frictional relationship between sales and sales operations or sales enablement. I was trying to break down some barriers and help my sales teams get the tools they needed to be more successful and be more efficient, and wasn't really feeling like we were moving far enough, fast enough to do what we needed to do. And so I guess I kind of got what I deserved with being that squeaky wheel when they said, "Well, great, you've got some great ideas, Tim. Why don't you come help us fix those?" And I can say now with a high degree of empathy that I have a great appreciation for the enormity of the task that people in sales operations and sales enablement have, and the sometimes thanklessness of that, that task now that I'm sitting on the other side of the desk. And I will say, like, you know, tongue in cheek, you know, it happened, but I actually think it's a good thing for people to spend some time in different roles within the organization, and certainly it has opened my eyes to how difficult it is to do that sales and enablement type of the role. So, you know, kind of back to your question, Tyler, I think this ties right into the theme of, you know, the role people play in making technology projects successful, is a mutual understanding and appreciation for the role every individual and all stakeholders play in those types of projects. Empathy is critical to success in any type of technology transformation, and I can say that with some firsthand experience.
That's great. So we'll move over to Winnie, and I have you know, a question that's similar in nature, which is your organization went from, you know, having no real technology backbone to, you know, fairly quickly, I think, ramping up a full kind of technology stack built on Salesforce to help the organization run not only more efficiently, but hopefully more effectively. But I'm curious, in your organization, where you have people that, again, they haven't been using technology as a day-to-day part of their job, how have you found the sort of rollout, and how do you work with your teams to, again, break down that barrier and make sure they understand the potential of using these new tools as opposed to, you know, pushing back on them?
So just to give you a very quick history, in the sense that we were a volunteer organization between 2006 and 2013, so all volunteer run. And so, you know, the volunteers were using very basic email tools and or Google Sheets and Google Docs. And I only started in March of 2018, and so when I came on, they were still using the Google tools, which are great. You know, they're strong, they're powerful, but considering the work we do, we have to, you know, measure the risks. Cybersecurity is huge for us right now. Privacy, all those things are very important to us. And so we've grown our team from, you know, volunteers to one executive director to now 11, almost 12 people. And, you know, very early on when I came on, within the first hour, when they were showing me what they were using, I knew we needed to get a CRM in place right away, just because we are an international organization. We work with hundreds and thousands of folks around the world. We get thousands of requests coming in for help, and we're also in a very lucky place right now where the generosity and support is coming in quite rapidly. And so to just keeping that all organized, making sure that we're not working in our silos, we have our programs team, we have our development team, we have our partnerships. So streamlining, making sure that everything is efficient is a priority for us, especially since, again, we're a small but mighty team of 11 doing all this work. It's important to have the right tools in place and a robust enough tool to accommodate and you know, streamline, let us collaborate with everyone all over the world. And I don't think it was very hard to convince our staff of that. You know, taking hours to pull reports, or taking, you know, hours just to get some information for an impact story to go out to our donors. All that time can be used, you know, more efficiently in actually saving lives, right? So again, we're a very small team, and so every minute, every hour that we have is very important and crucial to the work we do. And so we are all very excited about onboarding Salesforce. We were using it previously, but only in its very basic, limited capacity. We were only tracking current donors at the time, so we were not even tracking potential donors. We were not tracking our case individuals, the people that we help in the database. We were using spreadsheets for that. And again, when I talk about security, uploading pictures, images, documents, you know, for us, we have to shift very quickly into a system that we can trust. And, you know, because we do work with so many volunteers and other folks, you know, using spreadsheets, Google Sheets, and pivot tables, when someone is making an adjustment, that could, you know, mess up things all over the board. So again, we're trying to move very quickly, but at the same time, be very patient with onboarding this new tool, because we know how important it will be and how helpful it will be for our mission.
Right. Well, I love how you touched on the word purpose, which we've heard here, and I think that can become so important when you actually are aligning explicitly, not implicitly, but explicitly the technology project to the purpose of the organization, the purpose of the teams, so that there is a clear understanding of this is how this is going to help us deliver on that mission that we're all on.
Absolutely.
Which I think is incredibly important. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about that? In your role at LinkedIn, you work both within your own sales team around the technologies they use, but you also work with a lot of businesses on how they're adopting tools like Sales Navigator. How do you think about the role of making sure you're tying it back to their mission, their purpose, or how do you just create that culture of change within organizations that are trying to go through that status quo to using innovative new tools?
I'd say creating the culture is the foundational layer. It's incredibly important. And you can put cultural tenets on your wall, you can talk about your values at all hands, but how does it actually permeate through the organization is incredibly important. And what we found is creating a culture where everybody can be completely vulnerable, authentic, where people can speak their mind, they're incredibly comfortable within their environment, where leadership from the top down, frontline leaders can ensure that everybody can share their ideas. When you think about founders' mentality, you can't have founders if they feel like they need to have their armor on and they're not able to share their voice and they're working with inside of a culture that doesn't allow them to share their voice. So ultimately, that's been the key piece of allowing people to take on that founder's mentality and give that voice up through the culture. That's incredibly important. Now, in terms of how we actually have leveraged change or drawn change to the organization, we use a framework which we learned ourselves and eventually started to apply to our customers, because we found that our tool, Sales Navigator, our platform, was being viewed as a tool, and the adoption was low in some scenarios, specifically with some customers who potentially have individuals who are not technology savvy, and they're not leveraging the platform that they invested in. And we realized that if they're considering and thinking about this as a tool rather than a program, they're not approaching it from the right way. So we've built a methodology and a framework that we used internally, which really has a few key tenets. And the first, which is the most important and aligns to the purpose and the mission, is the why. If you can't nail the why you're doing something, communicate it broadly, reinforce that message, and if that's not really tied to something as important as your purpose, then it's going to fail. And you really need to make sure you nail that communication and continue to reinforce that communication ongoing through the process. And that's how we've been successful in instituting change.
It's a really interesting idea. I'm curious in the audience here, as you guys have gone about transformation or technology adoption projects, how many of you can think back to being really explicit in putting those whys and how this ties back to our mission, our purpose, up there on the boards, on the screens at the office as you're going through it? Can you think about, show of hands for those of you who have really actively done that? Yep, some people. And a show of, no, that's okay, the rest of you, we can infer. I think it's a great idea, and I think in our own team, and I mentioned one of my earlier stories where I don't think we did that enough early on, and say getting the whole team together to go, this is why we're all in on doing this, and I think it's key to success. Have you guys seen similar types of ideas in your organization that have worked, or does that spark ideas about how to create that kind of culture of change within your own organizations?
You want me to go first, Winnie?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, no, so I mean, one of the reasons I love coming to events like this is because you always learn from other people what they're doing well and learn from your own mistakes. So, it's funny, our purpose at Morneau Shapelle is actually improving lives, improving business. So the whole tenet of what we do is help organizations improve their lives of their people so they can put their best foot forward on behalf of the organization. By supporting their physical health, their mental health, their financial health, their emotional health. And we do a very good job of tying that to, our products and services that we provide to the external marketplace. I think we could do a better job, though, of aligning our internal projects to that purpose and tying it back all the time. I think more broadly speaking, I think that's definitely a takeaway from me. So thank you, Peter. I think more broadly speaking, that ties to the importance of communication early and often throughout any sort of transformational change. That is kind of another kind of principle of success. And I would say that we've gone through a couple of big projects within our team in the last 2 years, and we've gotten progressively better at communication, starting earlier, doing it more frequently, that sort of thing. But I still wouldn't say we've found the sweet spot. And to me, the sweet spot would be when people start coming back to my door going, Tim, stop telling us about this. Like, we get it, we get it. And nobody's doing that right now, so I think there's still room for us to do more.
Communication and trust is key. I shared a story with my current colleagues because I came from another organization. I was with them for 16 years. And when I left, we were literally straddling 3 databases. When we were transitioning from one to the other, we just did not, actually once when we were trying to update our current one, we didn't invest the time and money into doing it appropriately. All the money went into renewing licenses and maybe doing little tweaks, but it still looked like it was built in like the 80s. Right. And then after we were kind of sold on this other new database that we were trying to transition to, but it wasn't done properly, where our information and our data wasn't uploaded properly, so we didn't trust the information in there. And then our programs team thought, okay, we need to get moving on this, but we need another type of database that would service us, and so we onboarded something else. And so you can only imagine when you have 3 databases, and it was a relatively small to medium organization, not that many staff members, but with that lesson learned, when I came to Rainbow Railroad, it was very quick that I needed to take the time to assess the right database that we needed. I looked at 7 different ones, and then also the right consultant company to help us through this massive project, because I just did not personally want to go through what I went through before with the previous organization. And that time to assess who and what is right for you, as well as making sure that your colleagues and your teammates understand the purpose of it and agree. And even though I think one of the challenges is more about, it's not so much about onboarding the idea of new technology, but the comfortability and familiarity of and fear of using something new, and maybe the fear of slowing you down actually, because you have to learn something new. But for the most part, I think we all have our sights on the goal of getting a robust and efficient tool in place at our fingertips. But getting there, we have to be patient. And even through this process right now, we did have to pause the project. We started in January, and then we ended up pausing because our team and our programs and our events were just ramping up over the summer. Again, we're a small team, and so we needed to kind of concentrate and reprioritize some of the things we are doing, because we are juggling so many things. Yep. We're a newish organization, so we're rolling out tons of new tools, tons of new policies. We just finished or just approved our next 3-year strategic plan, so lots going on. So we did pause it, and we just kicked it off. We're kicking it off this week, actually, our user acceptance testing. So in a couple of months, we're hoping to deploy and train, but at the same time knowing that we have to be patient and communicating with the rest of the staff to make sure that everyone's comfortable every part of the way.
Yeah, well, it's all about the measuring twice and cutting once and doing it right the first time, not the third time, which is always extremely painful. Do you guys have any methodologies that you employ as part of that planning phase of requirements gathering and collaboration with the teams to make sure that when you do take on these new projects up front, that you're coming out the other side with what is needed by the teams, and you can ensure you're going to drive adoption, again, as opposed to we've all been there where we spend so much time on a project, we come out and then we go back to the drawing board because something didn't quite fit. Have you learned anything along the way with these projects, or anything that you use as part of your requirements and collaboration up front to make sure you've got the buy-in and you're going to deliver the project right the first time? Anyone across the board?
Well, first is listening to your employees is the most important piece in this, and that's where it all starts. So when you're thinking about a change initiative, if you're understanding what's the client experience like, what's the actual individual's experience like using the technology today, what are they saying they need, what are they saying that they that they're not getting today, is incredibly important. So setting up the mechanisms where you can gather that feedback from your employees is critical. We use some tools that provide all of our ideas right up to our product folks, where they're able to see collaboratively across anybody who touches a client, what are clients saying about our platform, and how can we potentially change this to be better for the client experience. So how do you gather all this information so that you collectively look at it and say, wow, what changes do we need to make? we're hearing something interesting from our employee base. There's something here. Now let's get the Tiger team together and bring in those voices and discover a bit more about what we need to change.
That's great.
Yeah, and you know, not to sound like a broken record, but I think drawing on Peter's theme and some of what we talked about just a couple minutes ago, it really is about engagement and communication early and often with the people that you're building these projects or these solutions for. You know, they've got to buy into, you know, the vision of why you're doing this and how it ties into the strategy of the business, how it's intended to help them be more efficient or more productive at what they're doing. You know, so they got to buy into why are we doing this project in the first place, and then they've got to be engaged in terms of how we hope or envision this to help them do whatever it is they do better, faster. And you know, as you're going through that evolution of the project, checking back with them regularly, you know, again, learning from our mistakes. We had some where, for various reasons, and often you kind of, it's beyond your control. You have, you know, a very tight timeline, and you're given direction to get it done, you know, very quickly by hook or by crook, and you end up cutting some corners with the best intentions in mind. But at the end of the day, you've got, okay, we talked to them at the beginning, we consulted, we spit out this, you know, solution at the end, and ta-da! And they go, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, it's always a fine balance. You're kind of playing with, you know, I'll defer to the project managers in the room that know better than me, but the triple constraints of, what is it, money, time, and resources, right? And trying to find the right balance of, you know, following the playbook, but hitting the milestones that have been laid out for you by the business. And that's always a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. What kind of, I'm interested to hear if you guys have any ideas, and if there's other input from the audience, that would be great, on what kinds of sort of metrics and signals of success do you guys think about as you are implementing these technology projects? Because there's the obvious things of, you know, on time and on scope, which we can always drive towards. But there are other things that we're unearthing here that I think are really important to the success of these kinds of projects. Do you guys employ any other kinds of metrics or indicators of success, or are there things that you've thought about of, you know, how do I say, yes, we delivered on what we promised, not just on time and on scope?
I think something that I will definitely, I do keep in mind is morale. So the morale, because what is important to me is that our staff, you know, what we do, the projects that we start, that everything is sustainable, right? So morale and energy, especially because of the work we do, it can be intense, it can be traumatic, you know, and so making sure that everyone is engaged, trusting the folks that are, you know, the knowledge specialists, especially leading the different parts of the project, is really important. It is health and wellness of our team is one of our #1 priorities, making sure that I'm there to listen, to support them, to just check in on what they need. And so that might be, it's not necessarily a number you can really attach to it or a statistic, but for me, because we are a small team, we're kind of like family, checking in, having those open communication, being very transparent, being very honest with each other of the challenges and the barriers are key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the ones we go by are ones that have been kind of brought up in earlier conversations. So I think Jonathan touched on, you know, data quality with respect to, you know, kind of building out some sort of internal CRM or sales application. Again, it doesn't matter how many bells or whistles you build into it, but if they don't trust the data that's inside of it, right, then you're going to fall flat. So I think to Judith's point earlier, I mean, you know, people were wanting more and more features, but if they would have delivered tons of features but poor data, then you kind of probably would have seen limited success that way as well. So we're paying a lot of attention to data quality and reliability right now within our organization. Adoption is the other obvious one. I mean, you know, are people using the tool without being harassed to use it? Or by being harassed, either way, actually, quite frankly. I'm, as long as they're using it. And then ultimately, a trailing indicator will be
spoken like a true salesperson.
Exactly.
We're all taking it.
That's right. Will be NPS, so, or customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
So, but that's a bit of a trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, you and I, Peter, were talking earlier about driving adoption within teams, and I think it's one that I know within our own team as well. It was something that we explicitly implemented at one point as we were rolling out new tools, because again, the early thinking is, oh, the finish line is deployment, but we explicitly set the finish line to be 6 to 12 months later, where we said we're not successful until we've seen a certain level of engagement and adoption of the tool, and either quantitative or qualitative feedback that it is helping them achieve the incremental result we were planning to. And that actually became pretty eye-opening when we were explicit about tracking those things and looking back and saying, and we've learned a lot about what kinds of tools where you see some consistency in the types of technologies that are getting favorable results or not versus others, and you get some pretty interesting insights. Mm-hmm. We touched on this a little bit already, but Peter, do you want to talk a bit more about sort of how you think about driving adoption within your own team or some of the techniques you use with customers?
On the concept of metrics, everybody's looking for the holy grail of impact and return on investment statements. I fully believe you need to look at some key usage adoption statistics. Pick out the ones that are relevant to the behavior change you're really trying to drive. Because at the end of the day, if you drive the right behavior change over time, that will make the right business impact down the road. So, survey is a great way to understand how are people using the technology today, and pick out of the usage metrics. It's not just a core, hey, are people using this feature, that feature, that feature? Which ones are core to what we're trying to drive towards? And let's just pick out a couple key ones that we're going to scorecard. We're going to measure tightly. We're going to look at on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. We're going to share that with the reinforcement team that we have. Hopefully that consists of frontline managers who can play a role in reinforcing the program and ensuring that the adoption goes to where it needs to go. But as long as you pick a couple key ones that are aligned to the behavior change you want, and you can communicate that broadly and drive towards that, you'll see the impact over time.
Love that idea of the reinforcement team, of folks that are explicitly there to make sure that we continue to see that, again, bringing it to frontline. And we naturally, I know in our team, we just have people that are natural advocates that surface. But in other cases, I think something like that where you're explicit about it and making sure you're identifying, those who are passionate about the technology or tool and they can actively reinforce and share across the teams.
Yeah, certainly. And there's techniques to do that. It doesn't necessarily need to be, the carrot or the stick. It's really a lot of it is communication. You've got all of these different communication vehicles, in which case you can share these behavior changes and metrics with your team. And ultimately, what you want to share is wins, right? You want to model the behavior that's actually really working and saying, hey, look at this individual who adopted this technology in the right way and look at the impact that they had. That's going to get a lot of attention, especially with salespeople when they start to say, holy cow, wait a second, that's driving this behavior and that's going to make me more successful, I'm in. So the more that you can reinforce that communication through whatever, all hands that you have, team meetings, any of those sessions you can, you're going to find success.
Yeah. Tim, you, earlier on, Greg mentioned Alex Honnold, who did the free solo climb, the wall climb up El Capitan. And I know you're involved in a program that's equally mentally and physically exhausting, which is a migration from Microsoft Dynamics to Salesforce. You're on your own free solo path.
Kind of what it feels like.
So my question for you is, do you sleep?
I sleep now that it's done, and yeah.
So in all seriousness, looking back on that, significant project, and again, for Tim's benefit, his organization goes through acquisitions frequently, where you're then bringing tools together from disparate organizations.
Yeah.
What have you pulled from that in going through that recently?
I guess I've pulled from it that, I don't like doing it more often than I have to, preferably not more than once. So it's not something I would recommend anybody do by choice, and I'm sure those of my team that are here today will support that theory. But I mean that's just the reality of business. I mean I think what it reinforces is, and it ties back to I think a lot of the themes that have been talked about today, going back to Greg's keynote, right? Is the world is the environment is changing so quickly around us, and so things like this are bound to happen, whether you're a shifter or a drifter. Either you're going to invoke the change or the change is going to be thrust upon you. And we really have to be able to as individuals and as teams, figure out how to adapt to that change. You know, and get better. Learn from what, figure out what we did well so that we carry those lessons forward into the next project. Figure out what we didn't do well so that we hopefully don't carry those those forward into the next project. And so, kind of going back to that transformation, it was really, I think we were all kind of, needed a couple of stiff drinks when we learned that we were going to do yet another CRM replatforming in less than 3 years. But at the end of the day, it's just that's what was required within the business, and so was really happy to see that actually our team internally embraced it. And at the end of the day, that's the type of thing that just whether it's moving from one CRM platform to another, or implementing a new sales tool like Sales Navigator. We're also going through other IT projects internally. We're about to go through our second ERP system in 8 years, because exciting. The business has doubled in size in both employee count and revenues, and the ERP platform we installed, which it seems like was just yesterday, no longer meets our needs. So through all of that, again, it really ties back to I think figuring out how to really build that resiliency and that embracement of change into the fabric of your organization and the people, and help them understand the whys of what you're doing, and bring them on that journey with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important, because you talk about, how like draining and challenging and exhausting it is, but I think that if teams go in with that mindset, right, it's going to be a lot more difficult. But when you're going into programs cross-functionally, and it's like there's constant reinforcement, constant motivation, then it can change, I think, the way that people think about it, the way that they approach it, and ultimately come out on the other side, I think, with a more collaborative win. I'm curious on, part of that, whether it's during the implementation process or the adoption. We heard, gamification talked about earlier of, things that you can do to motivate and incentivize the usage and adoption of new technologies. Have you guys experimented with anything? Is there anything you've done, in that realm that you found has worked? Is there like one of those things you were like, no way this is going to work. They're going to think this is the dumbest thing ever, and then like everybody loved it, and they were like, oh, this is great. Anything you've done that you'd recommend other people think about doing to motivate that right behavior?
And I think because we're such a unique organization, I loved hearing about earlier in the earlier panel about the games and such, which those are some great ideas. But for our team, the motivation is really our mission again. The more efficiency, the more time saved, the more lives we can save, the more money we can bring in. Again, our mission is very simple: money in, money out, to help people escape violence. Right. And so for us, that is the motivation. We have a great team of very incredibly compassionate people, very, very smart individuals. And again, no matter what type of barriers they might see onboarding new technology and fears, the mission of helping more people get out of danger is for us #1 and priority. So no matter how varied we are in our knowledge and comfortability, that's kind of our gold star.
Yeah, brilliant.
You have another tool in your toolbox called the performance review. And so, not using it in a negative connotation, but what we've actually done is we've put as part of a performance review a leverage score. And the way that we define leverage is, one, how are you leveraging the tools and the playbook and the processes around you at a starting point, so that's a requirement of your job. Like, are you taking advantage of the stuff that we're providing to ensure you're going to be successful? And then the second, are you providing leverage back to others? And what does that look like? Are you leading a change initiative? Are you an individual that's figured something out, and you roadmap, how do I solve this problem? And then you communicate that broadly to help others, whether in your office and across the country or across the globe, to solve that same problem. And that sort of helps, going back to that founder's mentality of solving problem and being involved in leading change. If you can inspire that in part of your performance review, that's another lever that you have. We're trying to help people feel like, hey, this is part of your job. It's not to actually help institute change and help us grow, rather than, I guess the carrot is, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to nix you on your performance review. It's more about, hey, we're going to inspire you that this is a way that you can actually get ahead by being a leader and showing that you can institute change.
Yeah, and maybe just the one I'll mention. I mean, I think for me, certainly, we're just coming out of the tail end of that replatforming, and so we're now kind of coming up for air and thinking about how to really drive that adoption. And so this conversation has kind of put gamification back on the top of the radar for me. But one of the things that we've done recently, which really helps, which may seem like a bit of a stick, but it's it's not a big stick, and we don't beat two people badly with it. But we've actually tied use of our CRM into critical business processes and taken away the loopholes for doing it a different way. So it's basically, if you want to set up this new client, the only way you can do it is by going in and using the system. And so that actually has worked quite effectively with a relatively low amount of noise.
Right. That's brilliant. And then, of course, you can always use red, yellow, and green balloons by people's desks to publicly fame the people who are doing the best job of adopting and leveraging, not shaming, of course, the people who aren't. We don't ever do that, of course. Well, with that, everybody, I wanted to, once again, thank our wonderful celebrity participants here on today's episode of Technology Transformation Hot Seat. And with that, I think we are ready to move on to the next one. So thank you very much, guys. And again, thank you all for your participation here. And we have our keynote next, so we will let the transition to that. So thanks again, guys.